The U.S. and China are raising the stakes of global trade, and millions of consumers could soon be feeling the pinch of that. The U.S. officially slammed China with new tariffs on Monday. They cover $200 billion worth of Chinese exports, things like electronics and furniture. For now, it's a 10% tax, but that's going to jump to 25% by the end of the year.
And China is not taking it lightly. Just after the U.S. imposed their tariffs, Beijing retaliated with tax on $60 billion of U.S. goods to the tune of 5 to 10%. Let's dig deeper into this back and forth. Stephen Zhang is in Beijing for us. Hello to you, Stephen. Certainly China indicating, as it has before, it will fight back with the U.S. in this escalation.
That's right, Natalie. They, as promised, have launched their counter tariffs just a minute after the U.S. tariffs went into effect. But the Chinese government, interestingly, also issued a lengthy policy paper just now on a national holiday to really reiterate its position on this trade war and defend itself. They basically portray themselves as a victim of U.S. trade protectionism and trade bullying, and saying this trade relationship has been the foundation of this bilateral relationship, but the U.S. really ruined it by launching this trade war and imposing tariffs on these billions of dollars of Chinese imports. Now, as you noted, the Chinese counter tariffs are no longer dollar for dollar because the U.S. imports a lot more from China than the other way around. That's one of Mr. Trump's original complaints against this trade imbalance. But for its part, many analysts think China still has some tricks in its sleeves. They could do a number of things down the road, including charging higher tariffs on U.S. imports by imposing some sort of import quota from the U.S., restricting its citizens from traveling to the U.S. for study and tourism, as well as providing tax relief for Chinese companies affected by U.S. tariffs. Now, they could also make life very difficult for American companies doing business in China. And many big names, including Apple, Boeing, and Starbucks, are increasingly relying on this market for their profits, as you know, Natalie.
Right. So we'll be hearing from those companies probably to see what the fallout is from this. Well, we know that both President Xi and President Trump have had a cozy relationship, but now we have this. And China has called off planned trade talks with the U.S., indicating this will get worse. What could be next here?
That's right. You know, interestingly, Mr. Trump continues to call Mr. Xi his good friend on a number of tweets, but Mr. Xi probably sees things very differently. But what's happened here, Natalie, according to many sources and analysts we've been talking to, is there probably is a level of underestimation on both sides of the other side's resolve in fighting this trade war. Now, from the Chinese perspective, I think a lot of Chinese officials initially viewed Mr. Trump as a transactional businessman who would be satisfied with some concessions from Beijing, for example, buying more American products to back down from his threat on a trade war. But that obviously didn't happen. Now, Mr. Xi apparently increasingly views these tariffs as more than just a trade and economic measure, but also a strategic move on the U.S. to contain the rise of China. That's why it's almost impossible for him to back down, because his whole reign, his policy at heart is about a rising China on the global stage, national rejuvenation, in his words, in Mr. Xi's words, realizing the Chinese dream. So that's really one reason many people say he is simply not going to make the kind of structural change on the economy demanded by Mr. Trump in the White House. Natalie.
All right. We'll continue to follow it, of course. Stephen Zhang for us in Beijing. Thank you.
And consumers and businesses in China are bracing for the impact of all of this. Right now, the effects may not be visible to the average person.
But the trade war is escalating, and it's sure to become more obvious. CNN's Matt Rivers spoke with people in Beijing to get their take.
If you want to talk to lots of people quickly in Beijing, take a scooter. Seriously, the traffic here is horrible.
So it might not look great, but it does work.
Our mission today, to find out how the average person in Beijing feels about the U.S.-China trade war. We start in one of Beijing's many outdoor workout areas, where we spot 77-year-old Se Shujian going strong on the leg press. She says China is strong too.
We are powerful now, and we aren't weak like in the past. Chinese people aren't easily bullied. The U.S. can't handicap China's development.
Chinese state media says that a lot, too. On August 10th, the People's Daily newspaper wrote, quote, "The U.S. is unwilling to see China develop and prosper and then surpass it. No hardship has ever stopped China from standing up, growing rich, and becoming strong." The anti-American drumbeat in state media is loud and consistent, though Su doesn't entirely agree.
We can't generalize them. People in the US aren't all bad. There are nice American people. It's just their leaders are bad.
Post-workout, it's over to a cafe on the other side of town where the coffee is strong, but support for the trade war is weak.
What do you think of the trade war?
I think it's wrong. It's only about politics.
Movie director Li Guangbo says China's policies could hurt ordinary people by hurting the economy overall. In Beijing's narrow, winding alleyways, the trade war can feel pretty far away. But think about it differently. Do tariffs make those playing cards more expensive? Does the delivery guy's petrol bill go up? Are veggies harder to source or export? Maybe, maybe not. It's too early to tell. But it is a lot to think about, enough to make you hungry.
Can I have one American pulled pork sandwich?
Sure.
Lunch break. This sandwich is more expensive now because American pork is on China's tariff list. I'm still going to eat it, though, because it's good, but still.
It's still lunchtime when we're back on the bike and over to the central business district, the natural habitat of white-collar workers. Trade war panic, right?
I didn't feel I'm affected so far.
Actually, it's a common sentiment around here. Most haven't felt the crunch yet. Several people we spoke to said that.
I think our country hasn't been affected that much so far. China doesn't really rely on the U.S. like it did in the 2000s.
But China's economy is already slowing down, and its stock markets aren't doing great either. The trade war certainly won't help with that, and for that reason, some around here are worried about the long term.
It definitely have a negative impact on Chinese economy.
So in the end, if your question is how do Chinese people feel about the trade war, there's no one way to answer that question. How people feel depends on what job they have, their political views. You're talking short or long-term impact and a million other reasons. But what is clear is that people are increasingly aware that a trade war is on and that the trade tensions could last a long time. Matt Rivers, CNN, Beijing.